Hello and welcome to the video. In this video, hopefully I'm going to shed a little bit of light on how to do this. Now we have a servo connected into a flight controller and the receiver that we're actually using is just connected via PPM, but it could be S-bus, it could be I-bus, it could be anything. But what we can do is we can control this servo using one of the auxiliary channels on our radio. Now you might want to do this because this servo might be a simple pan servo on an FPV camera, or you might have something like a PWM controlled buzzer connected on your model as well. And I feel that the documentation in Betaflight around this in particular is really crap. So I'm making this video and I don't profess to be an expert in this. I'm just going to share how I've got this setup working. So if you're trying to figure this out, hopefully you'll get some tips and tricks and ideas from watching the video. Now the first thing just to mention here is how we've got the model set up. If I just page through, on the mixer we have the standard 4 outputs: throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder. Then we have a mode switch and an arming switch, which is usually what we're going to have if we're setting up a quadcopter or multi-rotor. And I have another channel, channel 7, called servo, and that is the one, if I just come out of this, whoops, exit and page along, you see as I move that control it's moving on the screen and we have our little servo moving too. So let me just show you what you need to do, or what I've done anyway, in Betaflight to get this thing working. And it's got a little bit more complicated because they changed some of the ways in Betaflight that things like resources were assigned, so there's an extra step. So if you've ever tried to do this and just given up because it just wasn't working, you've probably missed this one step. And to be honest, it took me a minute to figure it out as well. So here we are in Betaflight, we're connected to the board, and first of all, what you want to do is turn on something called servo tilt. Now there are two ways that you can forward a channel from the radio onto the spare outputs on your flight controller. One is servo tilt. It only allows you to do it with 2 servos, but I really like it because it gives you an awful lot more control and it's easier to figure out, so that's what I'm going to show you in this video. There's also channel forwarding as well. That isn't as slick in my humble opinion, and if you only want to forward 1 or maybe 2 channels, I'd use servo tilt every time. So make sure servo tilt is turned on, save and reboot. Make sure you're in expert mode up here at the right hand side. If you're not in expert mode, you won't see the servo tab because not everybody uses it. If we go into the servo tab, then you can decide how you want everything to work. Now just jumping into the receiver, let me just move that control again. There we are. Auxiliary 3 is the one that I've connected to the control that I want to push forward. Because if you remember, we had throttle, aileron, elevator, rudder, then we had an arming switch, and we also had a mode switch as well. So auxiliary 3 is actually the 7th channel, which is that rotary switch that we just saw on the radio. So auxiliary 3 is the one we want to play with. If we go into servos, you can decide which servo you want and what is going to be controlled by which channel. So there's the 4 channels for the main flight controls. A1 I'm using for modes, A2 I'm using for arming, A3 is the one I've got connected. And I have turned A3 on to say in servo 1 I want you to connect it to A3. And I know that's working, so if I jump into the motors tab, and most of you have probably never realised that actually this is what this stuff is over here. If I move the control, there's servo 2 actually moving. You can actually see it working. That's what all this stuff is over here, and nobody ever talks about it. Now, that is where everyone usually gets stuck. And the reason is something called resources. So in the CLI, if we type in resource, here are all the things, and both logically and physically, and how they're all connected together. So these numbers at the end are all physical things, and here is all of the logical stuff, and they're all matched together in this table. So Betaflight knows where all of the motor outputs are, the PWM inputs, the I2C pins, the buzzer pins, the LED pins, everything is mapped on here. Now this is a really powerful part of Betaflight, and again it's probably not something that you get to play with very often. Now I've changed a couple of things in here. I have changed these 2 things. So let me change them back and I'll show you how to change them. So you can map any unused resource that isn't locked by the system to anything else. So I am first of all going to free that resource, and then I'm going to turn it back to what it was before, which was motor 5. We'll do the same with the other one. I just find it easier to cut and paste, it tends to work better. So again, we're going to free that resource up. This was originally motor 6. Let's save that and reboot it and come back in. Now if we go back to the desk, you should see that the servo is no longer moving, and that's because the output that the servo is plugged into is mapped as a motor output now, and that's how it is by default, and that's typically why if you try this and you get stuck, it doesn't work. So let me show you how to fix it. So again, we're going to be in CLI, going to type resource, and now we're going to change these motor 5 and motor 6 pins, which we have this plugged into, to be our servo. So let's, again, same thing, cut and paste the free resource. This time we're going to free it. We've got type none. Then we are going to tell it what it should be, and then we want this as servo 1. And again, might as well do it for the other one too, because we're allowed to map to using the servo pieces. Right, save it. So now if we check, we can see servo 1, servo 2, and now those two resources. Now if we go into the servos tab, and now we have to figure out which of the pins those servos actually relate to. Now I found that it isn't always entirely logical, so there is kind of a cheat way to do it. So I would say enable live mode, twiddle the control you're interested in, and click on the tab until you find which one it is that you've got it, and then click save, and then you have your control. So that is the trick. First of all, make sure that in configuration you have, I would recommend use servo tilt, it will allow you to do up to 2 servos. Then assign in the servos tab, again make sure you have expert mode turned on, that you've assigned the control to the right servo. You can double check that's the case. This is one of the cool things with the servos tab. We can make sure that's working. When that's working and you've got the control connected inside Betaflight, then you have to just tell Betaflight where the servo 1 and servo 2 connections are, and you do that using the resource command, and you can change any of the free resources to be whatever you want. So hopefully that helped those of you that have been struggling with this, and hopefully it'll give you an idea of where to go to get it working in your configuration. Thank you for taking the time to watch that video, and particularly for watching right to the very end. We try and release a video on Tuesday and Friday, and sometimes we'll release 1 or 2 extra ones in a week as well. All of the videos on the channel are organised into easy to use playlists, so do have a look in there, because if you're interested in a subject, we organise all the videos on that subject so you can find them easily all together in one place. If you like what we're doing, then please like and subscribe and tell others about the channel so they can come and join as well. We're available in all of the usual social media places, particularly in places like Instagram, Twitter, and we also share all of our 3D designs on Thingiverse.